take your hymn books over to hymn number 259. 259, everyone standing. We'll sing the first verse, and then we'll do a handshaking time because, we haven't spent enough time with each other today. And we'll come back and sing the last verse then. We have heard the joyful sound. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Spread the tidings all around. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Bear the news to every land. Climb the steeps and cross the waves. Onward 'tis our Lord's command. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Wafted on the rolling tide. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Down to sinners far and wide. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Sing the islands of the sea. Echo back ye ocean caves. Her shall keep her jubilee. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Sing above the Jesus saves, Jesus saves. By his death and endless love. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. And depart for mercy. Sing it song and tune. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Give the winds of time. Jesus saves. Let the nations now rejoice. Jesus Now, I'm just going to say, it was supposed to be on the second verse, but better late than never. We'll take it. All right.
You were going to lead it.
Oh, I don't know this. I lead the song. Cameron, would you open our service to prayer, please?
God, please help our country, Lord, and give Pastor the right words to say, Lord, and then help the young people of Ukraine, Lord, and then help Jonathan and Katrina and all the other missionaries in Ukraine to show them what to do, Lord. In Jesus bless his name, amen.
Man, you may be seated. Hymn number 223. That was the fastest handshaking portion I've ever seen. That's right. Hymn 223. I thirsted in the... I got 223. Okay, so somebody wrote 223 on mine and 323 on the others, so we're going to go to 323 to get on the same page as the others. That was Mrs. Troyer. Listen, don't let her use a GPS either, all right? And 323. More about Jesus would I know, more of his grace to others show, more of his saving fullness see, more of his love who died for me. More about Jesus, more about Jesus, more of his saving fullness see, more of his love who died for me. More about Jesus, let me learn, more of his holy will discern. Spirit of God, my teacher be, showing the things of Christ to me. More about Jesus, more about Jesus, more of his saving fullness see, more this week. Tomorrow is the ladies' meeting at 6:30. We have a picnic food. The key word is crown. This will be our last meeting until September, so they get the summer off. Tuesday, their Bible class is at 6:30. Wednesday is Grace Kids Club at 6 p.m. and prayer meeting at 7. Countryside Blitz is at 10 o'clock on Saturday. I heard there was a change to that Saturday.
Oh, yeah, I'm not having it.
For the ferry. Is that, are we doing stuffing? Are we doing anything, or is it just?
We can eat and stuff, but we're not gonna have time to go out, get back, and get up.
It's all them graduates, right? You know?
Gotcha. Okay, so you can meet and stuff, help stuff. Yeah, stuff. We'll be stuffing the pamphlets for future weeks on Saturday. And the twins' graduation party is 12 to 4 at Shelter House for, hey, I remembered, in Jamestown's Pymatuning Park. So there we go. That's the one. So if you can be there, that would be a blessing. Bring a pole. There's a great fishing pole right off of it. All right, and there's bring your frisbee discs. There's a great frisbee. The whole one is right outside the Shelter House, and Hole 9. But let's enjoy having some time fellowshipping with them and celebrating their accomplishment. And those adopted a missionary, make sure you let Pastor know when you're ready to give a report on your family, or he may call on you. It's a terrible thing. The Father-Son breakfast is Saturday, June 18th at 8 a.m. There is a sign-up sheet to let us know how many will attend, so ladies know how much food to prepare. All right. I think that is the Friday night VBS work night. Come and join the teens working on that. That would be great. And that should be something else. I already said that.
I know.
Oh, you want to do one? All right.
Is it Chris or Connie going to do the missionary? Connie? All right, we have our next Adopt a Missionary. By Miss Connie.
We took on the Hollands. Anybody know where they're at? Besides Miss Dee. And they're in Norway. They're 6 hours difference from us, so when you're thinking about them through the day, you need to know what time zone your missionaries are in. So right now it's 7:30, so they're just getting done with their evening service, or in the middle of their evening service right now. They are in, and I haven't pronounced it right yet, Sandnes. It's Sandnes. It's a suburb in the southern part of Norway. And they live 3 blocks from the train station roughly, because Russell is doing language courses online. He's not doing, I asked Beth if he's in his finals just like Jonathan is, and she said no. He just takes his tests as they come, so he takes his all year long. But he has to travel by train into, and I'm going to say it wrong, yeah, I'm going to say it wrong. It's Stavanges, and that's the main city in the southern part of Norway. It's the biggest, largest city in the southern left-hand corner of the country. Now, they live 4 blocks from a fjord. Anybody know what a fjord is? It's a water inlet. So it's like our harbors here. But so his view from the train is of the fjord once a week when he gets to go. I thought it was really pretty in the pictures that he's shown. In their newsletter, they haven't come out with their new one, so the one that I have is from April and May. They celebrated on May 17th Holland's birth anniversary celebration. So the whole country of Norway celebrated being Norwegian on May 17th. So they were able to go out and hand out tracts and pamphlets inviting people to their meeting. At Easter, they were able to, a group of people that they've been able to get in, meet in their surrounding area have actually invited them into their homes over Easter. So they have been able to get into people's homes, eat meals with them, learn about the culture, learn about the people. They're just asking for prayer for their language study. They're asking for prayer for their daughter's name is Ada, and she's 6. She just finished kindergarten. And so Beth was asking prayer for her to help finish up the year with her kindergarten studies, and also for Russell with the language skills and his tutoring classes, and then for just their outreach ministry. They don't have a church, so they're starting from scratch. And the other biggest thing is, you think our gas prices are bad?
Yes.
In April, he posted, was the last time he posted gas prices. He paid $8.57 a gallon in April. That's just their typical. Norway is one of the highest cost of living places for a missionary to go to. They had to raise twice as much, if you remember, they had to raise twice as much funds to go and able to be there to live more than any other missionary that we've supported. So when the cost of living goes up, their income doesn't go up, just like ours. So I wasn't courageous enough to ask him what the price of gas was this week with ours going up. But no, they you know, his grandfather had passed away last fall, and that has to be hard on your missionary when they can't be home for family. But they're just thanking the Lord that they're on the mission field. They've been there just over a year, so they're just getting started. So if you could just keep them in your prayers for his language studies and their outreach program that they're trying to do, getting people in their surrounding areas, going door to door.
Thank you.
Man. We're audibling. Can I get Caden and Cameron to take up the offering? Caden, can you ask God's blessing on the offering?
Thank you for this day, Lord. Help us have a good rest of the day, Lord. Help Pastor to have the right words to say, Lord. In Jesus' name,
Any testimonies tonight? Anybody have a testimony they'd like to share? Brother Rodney. Someone's coming shortly.
I just wanted to say that the lunch today was extraordinarily wonderful. Very keto-friendly lunch we had today, and it was delicious on top of that. And that's
Amen.
not a very easy combination to make. So I just want to commend the ladies on what a wonderful job they did.
Any other testimonies? It was a blessing to see Kyle get ordained yesterday. It is, you see too many people, young people, falling away from the faith because they find something they want more than God. And it was a blessing to see Kyle, who has had plenty of distractions in his life that would make a lot of people turn away from the faith. And he has not used any of those excuses. Instead, he has stayed faithful, and it was great to see him get ordained yesterday through there. Almost didn't make it, you know. Don't let mom ever be the map navigator. Ever. Just don't. But we made it. Barely. No. I know better than to let you have the mic. It's not happening. So I took videos of the experience following her directions and going up this mountain and through these back roads that were the wrong turns, by the way, because, you know, it was my navigator. And, right. She took us down Catnip Road. Yeah. Yeah. It was awful. We were supposed to be there 15 minutes early. We ended up being 20 minutes late. It's just, that was that kind of a navigation experience. Not my fault. Anyway, no. I told my sister at the beginning of the trip that I was going to let mom do all the navigating because I didn't want to hear the stories if I was wrong. And that decision looked better and better as the day went on. Anyway, all right. No, it was a blessing to be able to be a part of that and come back. Any other testimonies today? All right. John.
Take your hymnals and turn to hymn number 244. Hymn number 244. Everyone standing, please. Hymn number 244. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Amen. You may be seated. This time we have a special by Miss Connie.
One thing I did leave out earlier is the kids need to appreciate that they can get candy because in Norway, they only get it on Saturday. They don't let their kids have candy during the week.
Amen.
I am weak, but thou art strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea, daily walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. Through this world of toil and snares, if I falter, Lord, who cares? Who with me my burden shares? None but thee, dear Lord, none but thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea, daily walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. When my feeble life is o'er, time for me will be no more. Guide me gently, safely o'er to thy kingdom shore, to thy shore. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea, daily walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be.
Thank you, Connie. Appreciate that. Turn your Bibles to Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4, we're dealing with God being a missionary God, and that means he's concerned about people. And we're right now kind of a subheading underneath that is how do we partner with our missionaries? I've been enjoying this study and just getting a fresh glimpse of what it means to help a missionary. I think too many of us are just content to throw some money on the plate and put it towards missions, and I'm not against you doing that, but I think if you want to know more about your investment that you're making to those missionaries, you would apply yourself a little more and know where that money is going. I encourage you, this is probably the wrong year because of the cost of everything going up, but I encourage you to seek out a missions trip. Instead of taking a vacation, go on a missions trip. You say a vacation is not a missions trip. No, it is not. If you're going to actually take a missions trip, it will not be a vacation. You may be in a new area. You may be in a place you've never gone, maybe a place you've always wanted to go, but if you're helping a missionary, you're there to do something, not just to vacate. But I'd encourage you to take that and spend some of your money in a wise way. It'll change your perspective, one, about America. It'll also change your perspective about our missionaries. There's much for us to learn. Philippians chapter 4, verse 18, the Apostle Paul brings up the of a man who brought to him supplies. It's I believe, a prayer letter, part of Paul's prayer letter to the Philippians, and and you could call him a short-term missionary. In other words, he wasn't there to stay on the foreign field, but he was there to help Paul take some things, take some supplies, and he stayed for a time. He ended up staying longer because he almost died. I mean, that's a kind of sure as that, you know. Stay on the mission field longer. Some people do anything, stay on the mission field a little longer. He almost died. It's not funny, is it? That could happen. My other son, Samuel, doesn't like the idea of going to Ukraine because I could die there. Well, I here. I mean, I just drove most of the way across Pennsylvania and into Ohio, and I survived that. You can die in a number of ways. And Daniel and Joyce thought they were going to die on the road that they were crossing. It's funny, GPS is not infallible, that is for certain. And I happened to be going, I was following my GPS, and it took me to the exact same road they were going on. And as they were coming they were coming out back to the main road to go the way that we knew how to go, not following the GPS. And I was getting ready to go down that road. And they said, no, don't go that way. The bridge is out. All this kind of stuff. So I said, well, I'll just take you the way I know. But my GPS was still on, and when I got back on the main road, it redirected me to I thought was the way that we normally had gone. Started to take that road, and it wasn't the same road. It wasn't the right road. Ended up going back and going on the way that I knew how to get there, and we still almost didn't make it, but interesting. Epaphroditus is a figure you may have heard. How many of you have never heard the name Epaphroditus? Don't remember ever hearing the name? Okay, there's a few. He's not a well-known character in the Bible, a well-known person, and hopefully you'll get to know him a little bit better tonight. The Bible says in Philippians chapter 4, verse 18, but I have all, this is the Apostle Paul speaking to the Philippian church, but I have all and abound. I am full, having received of Epaphroditus the things which were sent from you, an odor of a sweet smell, a sacrifice acceptable, well-pleasing to God. So Epaphroditus comes from the Philippian church. He carries a care package with him, and he doesn't tell us what is in the package, but he says it is like an odor of a sweet smell. To a Jewish person, that is the incense in the sacrifice. That is the incense that the priest would burn while the sacrifice was being, it was prayers are represented in the Bible in the Old Testament as a incense, sweet smelling savor unto God. And Paul says, your gift, I'm full because your gift gave a sweet smelling savor to me because they cared about him. They recognized his needs. And again, the Bible doesn't tell us what is in the package. It does refer in a plural way, but his response feel like they've been given the ultimate treatment, the ultimate care. And some suggest that these were probably clothing, other necessities, things that would be needful, but also perhaps some money in it. But he didn't just deliver the cargo and then leave. He stayed on. And the Bible indicates that he continued with Paul doing work and service. He's known for that. Turn back to chapter 2, verse 25. And you get a little bit more of who this Epaphroditus is. He's probably the most underrated missionary in the Bible. But this is his resume. This is what Paul said of him. Chapter 2, verse 25. Yet I supposed it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus, my brother and companion in labor and fellow soldier, but your messenger and he that ministered to my wants. For he longed after you all and was full of heaviness, because that ye had heard that he had been sick. For indeed he was sick, nigh unto death. But God had mercy on him, and not on him only, but on me also, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. I sent him therefore the more carefully, that when ye see him again, ye may rejoice, and that I may be the less sorrowful. Receive him therefore in the Lord with all gladness, and hold such in reputation. Talk about honor this morning. Hold such in reputation. Because for the work of Christ he was nigh unto death, not regarding his life, to supply your lack of service toward me. What a great way of just saying, you sent somebody to help me, and I want you to know he helped me greatly. It was a great blessing to me. And even to the point of death, he was willing to serve the Lord. And I want you to think very highly of him. Can you imagine now? I had this conversation Friday this week concerning missionaries, and got to be careful on missions trips. You and I look at things from our point of view far too easily, and this is how we typically think a missions trip goes. It costs so much money to buy the ticket after I've gotten my visa, passport. Then it cost me to get a ticket. Probably the most expensive ticket we had, $1,500. I'm saying, you can tell who the money person is in the family. $1,695. And we were really going to save some money the year that Joyce had a free ticket. And I just had to buy a companion ticket to go with hers. Her ticket would have been $6,000, which is like 3 times the price of a normal ticket. That's how they get you. You know, but so we flew there separately and ended up in the same place. It was okay. But anyway, but here's what we typically do on a missions trip. We buy the ticket, and because we've spent all that money on the tickets and the visas, we think that the missionaries should just be thankful that we showed up at all, and we get there and we expect them to buy the food, buy the place for us to stay, and we're a real blessing to them. And I've seen this happen to missionaries, to where missionaries are saying, we don't need any more blessings, please stay home. And when I heard, it's something that I never thought about. And when I went to Uganda or to Ghana, West Africa, we paid our own way. When we stopped at a restaurant, we paid our own food. And I'm thinking later on, I should have paid the missionaries' food. I'm thinking how I could have improved my stay for the missionary, been a blessing to him and his family. I stayed with him for a couple of days, Brother Siegbert, a couple of days, and I wish I would have been more thoughtful, but this was all new to me. So then I go and spend some time at my son-in-law's missionary home a few years later. Let me say, and before that, though, I went to Ukraine, and Brother Brian provided breakfast, building his church. I understand that, but it didn't occur to me until we were almost at the end of the thing, and his food seemed to be less. And he made the comment, he didn't say it harshly, he didn't say it critically. He said, I'm almost out of money. And that's when it dawned on me, he's paying for all these people to eat, and I've been buying some things, but I've actually created a burden for him rather than a blessing. I mean, we're putting the building up, I understand, but I'm just trying to look at it, okay, stop looking at it from my point of view, look at it from their point of view. Okay, I got 8 guys come from the States. I've got to pay for their food, I've got to pay for their lodging, how is that a blessing to them? How is that a blessing? And the fullness of that did not hit me until I go and spend some time with my daughter now in the Philippines on another missionary trip. And my wife and I went. Now, maybe the difference is my wife went on that trip. Maybe that's the difference. This is the value of a wife. And we determined we weren't going to let them pay for our stuff as much as possible. There were times when we didn't know how to deal with something, and so they dealt with it, and then we would reimburse. And then I determined from that point on, and I thought it's easy when it's your kid. Any money that I have left over in my wallet that I've changed into Filipino coinage, I'm going to leave. Except in the Philippines, you have to pay to leave the country. So when you're in the airport, you have to have enough money to pay that last tax so you can leave. I mean, crying out loud, you got to pay to leave. So I had to keep enough to do that. But I learned, and after that, since then, it's been my goal when we can be on a missions trip to always leave as much finances as I could. But that was a process in my part, not thinking about how it affects the missionary. It's such a blessing for you that I'm coming, you're going to pay for everything that I need. No, it shouldn't be that way. And when I've brought that up to other people, they look at me kind of dumbfounded, and I never thought of it that way. That's because we're American. We're spoiled. Epaphroditus is not described as a great eloquent soul winner. He is described by Paul as a laborer, a minister, a servant. Our perspective needs to change when it comes to helping our missionaries. He was so proficient in his service to Paul that Paul could write that he ministered to my wants. If Paul had a logistical need, he could turn his request to and Epaphroditus would take care of it. Logistics is how to get from here to there, how to accomplish the next task, and a preparation for things needed. I've known people that have had jobs that their only job was to prepare the trucks for the workers who were going out to the field to do the work, whether it be an electrician or a plumber. Their job was to stock the truck so he had everything he needed to be able to do the job. And that's really what a logistical need is for us, for missionaries. Our job is to provide all the things that they need so they can do the job that we expect them to do, to take care of those things. There are many things that missionaries cannot do in their own effort and time, but things that must be accomplished if the gospel is to be furthered. There's something that you don't think about. Let me just see what kind of knowledge you have. Maybe some of you know this, and I expect Dee Dee knows this probably as much as any. And I hate to keep bringing this up about Dee Dee, but she's tuned into missionaries, like we all should be. How many churches do you think the average missionary is supported by? How many churches does it take to send a missionary? Connie?
150.
Anybody else? What's that?
I said it's around there somewhere.
Some. Anybody else?
Wouldn't it depend on where they're going?
It does. Hollands, because of their expenses, would have probably a higher number. The average is roughly around 100 churches. And it does depend on where they're going, how many kids they have, how many kids, all those things add expenses, those different kinds of costs. But think about this now. And we use All Points Baptist Missions. You ever wonder why we use All Points Baptist Missions? They don't do everything that we could do, but they carry the biggest burden, which is the financial aspect, which is when 100 churches send you checks, they've got to turn that into an account and then send that on to the field and get it to the missionary. Now, you got 21 missionaries. What if we did that for every missionary?
We'd have to hire another accountant.
Well, what I'm saying is that's why they're using All Points Baptist Missions, because they will do that on our behalf and help them with the financial aspect of that. If somebody said, hey, I think I could do that for the Skeens, then we could take that labor away from All Points Baptist Missions and they could have somebody else, they could free them up to do another missionary. So there's aspects to this that there's a logistical aspect that we don't often think about. Who does take care of the checks and who does take care of those things? And the first term that Jonathan was gone, he had a post office box and I took care of that, and apparently not good enough because now I don't do it. Somebody else takes care of that. When they have there was an argument with the income tax and he was owed money, and this is from 2017, and they sent a check to my house for him. What do I do with that? Woo! No, I didn't do that. So when Brother Andrew took his trip, he carried with him the checks that was owed Jonathan so he could sign them and then brought them back. Now, I don't know that we had to do that, but that's what Jonathan wanted to do. And so there are things that we don't think about that take place while they're on the field. And those are logistics. Those are things, how we take care of that. And if nobody takes care of that, it usually falls on the pastor or somebody else that would look after that. But there's things that you can do to help alleviate a missionary and the burdens that they have. That's just one aspect of that. Jonathan first came. he did his own taxes, and he was pleased with himself that he could do his own taxes. And I said, there's a man in Mercer that we use for our taxes. He charges us, at the time it was $50 a year, because I'm a pastor. And he says, the first question he asked us when we first went to meet this man, he says, do you tithe? That's kind of an odd question to ask a pastor. Of course we tithe. He said, no. You'd be surprised how many pastors think, being a pastor, they don't have to tithe. Okay, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't know how somebody could justify that, but he says, because you tithe, I'm going to charge you $50. If you didn't charge, I'd charge you. If you didn't tithe, you'd pay $250. Cha-ching! I'm glad I tithe. You know. So I'm telling Jonathan, this guy, I'm assuming you tithe, will do your taxes for $50. That's a lot cheaper and a lot easier than you doing it yourself. And for years, I'm going to do it myself. Well, when he went to this guy, because it started getting complicated with all the checks coming in and different things like that, found out he had misapplied some things and money was owed to him, and cha-ching, here comes some money. Shouldn't you have listened to me before that? But I'm not capable of doing his taxes any more than he is, but I could tell him how he could find a place to get his taxes done. Wasn't going to cost him an arm and a leg. That's logistics. Those are things that you don't think about on a regular basis. I've told a number of missionaries who have asked me, how does so-and-so do their taxes? And I say, there's a guy in Mercer that we've used for a few years. And you say, well, there was another Christian when I first came, Pastor Johnson told me about, that he used, and he was a Christian guy, but he charged me the full amount, $225 to do my taxes. I said, thank you very much, brother. and I don't know that he did a good job or bad job, but I was told about this guy that helps pastors and missionaries, and he'll only charge them a certain amount. I think it's up to $60 now, maybe $65. And but that's something I could do to help my missionary. Maybe you have maybe you know of something that could help your missionary when they're in the field. You have a mechanic. You'd be amazed how they're away for a few years. They lose contacts with people who can help them in different places. So, got a mechanic, got different things that go on. Those are things that you can help them at. Take care of a missionary's aging parents. You're on a foreign field and your parents are hurting. They need somebody to take care of, and you don't have any family that can help. And maybe there's a way that we could help in that situation. I asked Jonathan this week, I said, could you give me your dad's number so I could call him and talk to him, see what his situation is, see if there's anything we can do to help him through this cancer thing. And I said, he may not want that. He may not. You have to let me know if you don't think that he'd like that, because some people deal with those things differently. And Jonathan said, well, I don't think he would like that, have that conversation. I said, okay, then you need to have that conversation. You need to find out what the cancer is. You need to find out how we should be praying about this and different things like that. But we're just trying to be a blessing. His dad reached out to him for a reason. His dad is saying, my son's clear over in this foreign country, and I've got cancer. And I'm saying somebody needs to give some attention to that father. He's hurting. Those are things you don't typically think of. We ought to. We ought to be more thoughtful towards those things. Another huge logistical burden is the regular packing and shipping of material goods. Now, I have to tell you, we learned the hard way with this. I don't think I told you this story, right? Chris and Elizabeth get to the Philippines. And Elizabeth, through conversations, I think it was Skype at the time, said we can't get this, we can't get that. And there was a list of a few things. And we went out and bought $30 worth of stuff, put it in a box, and it cost us $75 to send to them. And we thought, that's kind of stupid, it's kind of silly, but my daughter wants some candy. So I'm going to send her some $30 worth of candy, cost us $75, that's no big deal. We'll eat that. Not literally, we'll pay the price so that she could open it up and say, oh, my parents love me so much. We were willing to do that. There's one problem. When it got to the Philippines, they charged them $75 for customs for that box. So that $30, and that was not okay because that's now hurting my son-in-law and and my family because I wanted to be a blessing. So you find out those things, and we don't send things like that anymore. We quit sending them like that. We found out there was a company that we could send through that as long as you could fit it in this box. Was there a weight limit? As long as it fit in this box, you could put whatever you wanted in there. The last year that we were going to send the box was going to be my granddaughter's 10th birthday, and I was preparing. I had designed a jewelry box that I was going to make for her that would fit inside that box. The size was all contingent whether it would fit in the box. Then I got word that they were coming back to the States, and so that kind of got blown out, and I didn't even make the jewelry box. I'm kind of sad that I never made the jewelry box. But those are things we never thought of until we actually had it happen. And there was a few times people sent T-shirts, sometimes not even new ones, and it cost them $75 to get them out of customs. And they don't know what's in the box until they open it up after they've paid the $75. So they had to put out a message to their churches, please don't send us packages. It's not that we don't want things, but until we know the value of it, it might be a lot more expensive than if, you know, they ordered it from Amazon in the States and have them shipped over to the Philippines. Might as well do that, and at least they're getting what they want then, sizes and everything like that. So before you send a care package to a missionary, you need to find out the logistics that are involved. With the Skeens, there's a Meast shipping company. They will either ship it by boat or by air. Boat takes a few months. Boat takes a few months. Air takes a few weeks. But there's a cost involved in all that. And I never sent anything to Jonathan without him saying, I need this. Because I don't want to send him something that he's not going to use and it costs that much to send. So you try to think about their needs, not what you want to feel good about. I felt real good about myself. I sent my missionary this here thing, and they threw it away when they got it. You know, what good is that? We don't think about those things, but those are realities that we see. Look at Acts chapter 17. Acts chapter 17. This is the process of Epaphroditus coming into the picture. Acts chapter 17, verse 14 and 15. It said, then immediately the brethren sent away Paul to go as it were to the sea, but Silas and Timotheus abode there still, and they that conducted Paul brought him unto Athens, and receiving a commandment unto Silas and Timotheus for to come to him for all speed, they departed. So here we have the actions of a missionary. He's on the field, he's out doing things, and they send him away because of the great tumult that has just taken place. Send him to Athens, and this is where the message to the Athenians comes, where he says, you know, the God that you have, you don't know who he is, I'm going to teach you about. To the unknown God is the inscription that they found. That's where they send him for a vacation. He ends up preaching and doing a great work there. Back to Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4, verses 15 and 16. It says, know also that in the beginning of the started from Macedonia, no church communicated with me as concerning giving and receiving, but ye only. For even in Thessalonica ye sent once and again unto my necessity. So here Paul reflects that this church of Philippi, again, this was a persecuted church. This was probably the poorest church among the churches that he was a part of, and yet they saw to his needs. I think sometimes wealth creates blindness. Having wealth makes you assume other people have the same things. Whereas somebody who is poor and without, they have a tenderness towards somebody. Maybe they don't have that either. Maybe, you know, so I get this blessing. Rather than keep it to myself, I'm going to send that on to the missionary. There's just a different mentality there. One who recognizes what it is to be without, and therefore you see that somebody else without is much worse than you having nothing. So there's a mindset that you and I have to be careful about. Don't assume what you think about a missionary is true, or what you think about missions is true, or what they're going through. This ministry is collecting, packing, and delivering items to their missionary as an aspect of a partnership with the Apostle Paul. That's what it was to them. It wasn't just a simple, hey, how you doing? Hope you're doing good. No, they sought to meet his needs. A dependable volunteer willing to partner with a missionary in this ministry, this type of ministry, would be a great asset to the cause of missions. Epaphroditus may not receive recognition in Bible to this grateful for fellow soldiers who make sure that they get what they need so they can accomplish the work God has. So before you send anything to a person overseas, you need to confirm the shipping details and the contents with the missionary or the sending church or the mission board. Find out what it takes to get something to that missionary. And some countries demand ridiculous custom fees, and others there are shipping stipulations that could make shipping some of the suggestions in this some of the things that I've talked about almost prohibitive. To send a pack of candy would be so ridiculously expensive. It'd be better that it were a Saturday thing. Only on Saturdays can you have candy. Limit the intake there. Before you ask a missionary, here's something else I want you to think about. Before you ask a missionary if they have any needs, send them, realize besides the cost of the items, there are shipping costs. It might cost $100 to send a box. The Palampine box that they send to the Philippines is between $90 to $100 when you send that box that you can put anything in there. Costs that much money. So make sure you're putting something worth paying $100 for and meeting their needs. And consider whether you're willing to pay the cost for the shipping of that. He said, well, I'm not going to pay it. Well, who's going to pay it? So think about that before you get excited about sending something. Realize we have 21 missionaries that we can't send everybody a care package. I appreciate what our ladies do. We send a college box to our missionaries, college students who are in the States going to college. We send them a care package, and it has always been received well by those missionary kids. And I think it's something that is commendable, ladies, that you do. But we find out what they like, their favorite candy bar, their favorite cookie, their favorite whatever. And if we can send it, we'll send it to them. Ladies, what was the most unusual thing that you've sent, you think? Can you? There was a girl that wanted something, and I can't remember. We had trouble finding it. We had to look around for it. I don't remember what it was. But when you take that extra effort, go the extra mile, it makes a big difference in them when you see that you've done it. So, but count the cost before you make the promise to somebody. Hey, we'll send you something. Find out what it's going to cost you. And if we can't absorb that, then don't make the promise. So before you make a promise, find out how much just ask them, hey, how do people send things to you, and is it affordable? Chris and Elizabeth would tell us, don't send birthday cards in a typical Walmart envelope. It'll never make it there. They're assuming there's money in there, so somebody's going to pilfer through that. So you'd have to send a great big manila envelope with a card inside of that. That's the way you would disguise that. It doesn't look like it has money in it. If they think it's got money, it's never going to make it to its destination. We sent you a card 3 months ago. You haven't got that yet? No, it never made it. So some places are like that. You have to be careful. To Philippians chapter 4, verse 15. Now you Philippians know also that in the beginning of the gospel, when I departed from Macedonia, no church communicated with me as concerning giving and receiving, but ye only. Don't assume other churches are trying to meet the needs of the missionaries. Here's what I would prefer you do, especially with your adopted missionary. Assume you're the only one doing this. And it'll change your attitude about what you try to do for them. Assume that you're the only one, because you may be the only one. Most missionaries don't like to talk about finances. And when they do, usually it's about ministry. It's not about themselves. Paul's letter to the Philippians is very instructive about our philosophy of financial support. So we're now going from logistical to financial support. You say, well, we support them financially. Well, okay, but there are times when they need extra money for different things, and they may let us know in a prayer letter, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Paul didn't have a DVD to send with his prayer letter to the Philippians. He didn't have a way to present those types of things as our missionaries do today often. But Paul made his direction and mission field clear. He was planning to take the gospel to Spain, according to Romans 15, verses 24 through 28. And his desire and expectation of support by the church in Rome was obvious when he wrote, I trust to be brought on my way thitherward by you. I'm planning to come to you. I trust that you're going to help me do that. You're going to be able to supply the need that I have to do that. Of course, all missionaries and all churches need more support. Finances is always something that we have to deal with. It should be much preferred when a pastor sees what's going on, doing in this place, and decides, I don't care if your support level is 50% or 100%. When we were looking at taking on a missionary, we start with the same criteria, and I have different people contact different missionaries, and I say, okay, do you still need support? What is your support level? Paul Perucci, when he was a missionary to Romania, said probably to me the smartest thing that I had ever heard a missionary say concerning support, financial support. He said, I don't give percentages because anything that I do ministry money. The more I have, the more I can do. And I love that because he's saying there's no limit to what I can accomplish if I have the funds. If you'll supply the funds, I can do greater things with that money. So he didn't put a limitation on that. I talked to Mark McElreath yesterday at the ordination, and I said, man, we really wanted to support you because I want to be part of a church that's being started in Atlanta. There are no independent fundamental Baptist churches in the Outer Banks, whatever the I-7 number, huh? Whatever the perimeter is, there are no independent Baptist churches still in there. There used to be, but they all moved out because that's where the suburbs went. And he says, hey, I was a missionary to Ethiopia. Skin color doesn't mean a thing to me. And he said, there needs to be an independent Baptist church inside the perimeter. And they talk down there, from what I've read from his letters and things, there's a difference in those people. They recognize it. Are you inside there? Are you outside there? And anyway, long story short, he has now got 5 families that are part of his church, and they're meeting in a church that that doesn't have a pastor. It's a black church, and some of the people are coming to their afternoon service, and they're down to a handful of people in the black church, and they're starting to come, and they're starting, the ones that are not coming are starting to get an attitude about it. We're losing our people to this guy. Instead of, praise the Lord, we're getting, things can be. But I told him, I said, look, I wish we could still take you on. I want to be part of that work. I want to be a part of putting a church in Atlanta. He says, well, you can give me 101% if you want. And I'm like, brother, help me out here. You know, I want to. He doesn't have the same philosophy. And he's not in it for the money. That should be a refreshing thing for us. He doesn't want it just for the money. And he says, I think the Lord's going to take care of us. Praise the Lord. I'm glad. But I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to be able to say, hey, we had a part of putting a church in Atlanta. Praise the Lord. I think there ought to be just a desire. And so I recognize, you know, here's the other thing. Some churches, some pastors have actually told missionaries, I've had more than one proof that this is a true statement. More than one pastor has said to a missionary, when you get to the field, I'll start supporting you. I don't want to for your deputation. If every pastor did that, they would never get to the foreign field or any field. That's so short-sighted. I would rather, we're going to have young man who just graduated last year, not this year, but last year, from college, and he's going to be going to Albania to deal with the deaf in Albania. That's pretty specific. That's a specified field, my brain. And I talked to him about it, and you know, I'd love to see him get married, but that may not be in the plans. And that's not a requirement for a missionary, right? No. There's arguments about that. I don't believe he was. Anyway, so he's coming for our mission conference, and he's just getting started. I mean, he was excited. I mean, you should have heard his voice when I talked to him and said, hey, I'd like to have you come in for our mission conference. Brother Troy, that's because of a great blessing. You know how last time a missionary said, oh, it's such a great blessing just to be a part. I didn't offer him any money. I didn't offer him any support. I just said, I'd like you to have him come in for our mission conference. I want our folks to get to know you. His dad pastors a church in just this side of Cleveland. I know his dad fairly well, pretty good guy. You know, I don't know anything that I disagree with him about, okay? I don't want you to get the wrong impression. I'd like to be friendlier, but we don't know each other any more than that. Okay. Casey Ray, guy that just graduated this May. He's right now up in Detroit. He just led 2 people to the Lord in Detroit, Michigan, in a Muslim heavy fortified area. They just had they set up like a carnival type thing for kids to be able to come, kind of like our VBS type stuff, and they had over 450 Muslim people come into their property, and they gave the gospel to every one of those people. And he's just doing this as a summer thing before God sets him on his next course. I want to get in on supporting somebody like that because they're hungry for soul winning. They're hungry for seeing God do something great. They're not limited by prejudice or any other stupid thing that could stop somebody from serving the Lord. I just want to be a part of his life. He knows that. I communicate with him on a regular basis. And we'll see what God does with him. But there's things that we can do to help these folks. Sending missionaries is expensive. According to the missionary agencies that were surveyed, Independent Baptist Missionary Family requires $6,200 a month. $6,200 a month. I don't know what you make or how much you earn in your life, but that is not just for the care of the missionary. That's so that he can have. Okay, so you give a missionary this much money. What's he going to do with that? He's going to buy a place to rent. He's got to get a vehicle. He's got to pay taxes or pay insurance for his vehicle and his house. He's got to buy food. All that comes out of that. Plus, he has to have enough money that when he wants to start a church, he has to rent another building, provide the utilities for that. So it's not a cheap thing for a missionary to go to a foreign field. And you talk about Norway being the top expensive places for a missionary to go. And you start to see that the burden is real. I don't like money. No, I shouldn't say that. I like money. I like when I have extra money. But I don't like talking about money from the pulpit. And yet the Bible, how much does the Bible talk about money? So I'm negligent if I don't talk about finances and how we should take care of our finances and different things like that. But it's not something I'm comfortable dealing with. I've had people, when they find out how much a missionary has to have a month, say, well, man, I could live high on a hog. Well, are you doing anything with your money to serve God? You want to criticize a preacher or a missionary? Are you trying to win people to Christ with the money you have? You trying to start a church? Don't you ever call a missionary in front of me. Because I can tell you've never been on the mission field. You've not seen what it takes for a missionary to get there, or the strength of character involved when you're away from everything and you have to make right decisions. Missionaries have much to be commended about. Here's what the Bible says in Romans chapter 10, verse 13. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. We love that verse, don't we? Whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. But then the question is asked, how then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? People aren't going to call on a God they've never heard of, or they don't understand, they don't know how to believe in him. And how shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher? That's why we send missionaries. And how shall they preach except they be sent? So it costs a lot to send a missionary. How much is too much? I feel sorry for some missionaries more than others. I feel sorry for the missionary that has a burden for Hawaii. I mean, think about it. Oh, yeah. Going to Hawaii to be a missionary. Let me in on that gig. Ernie Brown was a missionary for, 30 years in Hawaii. And I'm sure he had all kinds of smirks, he and his wife. Then there's the Holland's parents in the Arctic. And just about every Sunday, if you're on his Facebook page, you'll see him thanking the 10 or 12 people that came out to service today. You say, we're spending that kind of money for 10 or 12 people? Hey, you're one person, and God gave his son for you. How much is too much? How much is too much to witness to a group of people? How shall they hear without a preacher, and how shall they preach except they be sent? Man, there's so much to, you can have a proper view of a missionary or you can have an improper view of a missionary. And I will say this when it comes to finances. The people that have said to me, all you want is my money. I know my heart. I know my conscience. That's the furthest thing from my mind. But what I have found when somebody tells me, they're the one that has the problem with the money. All you want is my money. No. I could care less about your money. I've seen money ruin people. Joyce was just telling me about a couple that won the lottery. What happened to him? He killed her because they had a fight over the money, and now he's in prison the rest of his life. What good is that money? I knew a family through another family in our church in Ohio that won the lottery. They built a brand new home on a nice, beautiful setting, and started getting arguments over how the money was being spent, and they ended up divorced. I think when they hit the lottery, they never would have dreamed that money would come in between them like that. So don't tell me the church is only after people's money. Money is a necessary thing to do the work of the Lord. It's necessary. It's how we do things. Don't be so in love with your money that when you see a brother in need, you're not willing to help. Just be careful. With Holland's grandfather passing away, I remember being very thankful that Chris and Elizabeth happened to be home when my stepdad passed away. He was to them a grandpa. To my kids, he was grandpa. I can't imagine being so far away and so costly to come home that you couldn't come home to say goodbye to a loved one. My daughter got to be there for his last breath. It was not easy, but it was a lot better than her being in the Philippines when all that took place. Don't imagine evil when there is no evil. Don't try to give bad motivation to a missionary, on a missionary, when they're hurting because they missed something like that. And you've heard me confess, I wept more than once when my daughter would send pictures of first things that certain of my grandchildren would do. It's great to have a picture, but I wasn't there to be a part of it. Don't take away, don't rob from a missionary the sacrifice that they've made. To feel better about yourself, recognize they've made a great sacrifice to serve God. And they need our help. They need our partnership. They need our love and our compassion. When you read a report from a missionary, Brother Jonathan and I shared this morning, they don't say, it looks like Anastasia, but they pronounce it differently. Do you know how you would say that, Marina? And yeah, is it Anastasia or something? I was talking to Marina. That's it, Anastasia. I mean, I looked at it and I said, Anastasia. No. Anastasia. And led her to the Lord. And he said, and there was somebody else that made a profession of faith also. How I look at that now is, one day in heaven we're going to stand around the throne of God and we're going to be introduced to somebody that we had a part in their salvation because we sent Jonathan. And all these missionaries are going to have part. When you read of somebody getting saved, hey, we have a part in that. Somebody getting saved, we're blessed in that we had the opportunity to send someone so that they could reach somebody with the gospel. Praise the Lord. That financial burden ceases to be a burden then, and it turns into a blessing. Was asked one time by a deacon here, how much gas does it cost to run those vans? And they were being critical of how much we were spending picking up kids. This is years ago. And I said, well, how much is a soul worth to you? He didn't like the answer. I didn't like his question. How much is too much? Let me ask you to pray for our missionaries, and I hope, see, Dee Dee, I think you said you're ready for your report. Anybody else ready for a report next week? Stephanie? Okay, so you need to do Sunday morning? Okay, have you do Sunday morning, you do Sunday night next week. Remind me of that, okay? Others of you that are adopting folks, make sure you have something prepared. Get a missionary adopted and then participate in that, all right? We're getting ready to partake of the Lord's Supper. I hope you will have prepared your heart, have thought about things. This morning talking about the flesh, defiling the flesh. It is so easy to do. And Saturday I was at a men's conference, and Jerry Ross, who you probably know who Jerry Ross is, he's a pastor in Indiana who has written several books. But he has a hobby of knife making. He makes his own knives. He makes them. He starts with a hunk of metal, hunk of wood. He cuts it down, and he showed the process of doing that. And in one aspect, he had cut the steel with a bandsaw, and there was some parts were long, big pieces that he cut off, and then there were some just a couple of small pieces. And he likened that as there's things that God has to cut out of our lives in order to use us in a way that glorifies Him. Sometimes they're big things. Sometimes they're little things. And even to the point he said he takes the knife after he has cut it to the shape and cleaned it up a little bit. He then begins to cut or sand the blade down, and he gets the blade to about the width of a dime. Gets it down to that much. So he's removing particles at that point. And what does God have to do to us to get us whittled down to where we can have an edge where we can be used? He said if you took that metal and tried to cut a tomato, it'd just smash the tomato. Wouldn't cut it at all. You've got to get it down to an edge, and then you've got to sharpen it and sharpen it. And then he talked about the hardening process where you put it into the fire, and he says, while it's in the fire, you can't take your eyes off of it, because if it turns white, you've just ruined the metal. You got too hot. So you're watching it, you're watching it, you're watching it. And he said that's when you're in the trial of your life, God is watching you the closest, because He's not going to let it ruin you. He doesn't allow the trials in our lives to ruin us. He allows the trials in our life to get us tempered to where we can be usable and we won't just bend or break off. We're not brittle. But then after he does that, he takes the knife and, let's see, I've got it all written down in my notebook right over there. At one point, I don't remember that point, but he takes that knife and he shoves it into oil, and the flames will come out of that. And he counts to 10 slowly. Then he takes it out and then he shoves it into the sand next to that's in the bucket. And he lets it, the sand causes it to cool slowly. If it cools too fast, it would become brittle and hard and make it crack. So it cools slowly. After a couple of hours, he'll pull it out. If he can, it's cooled sufficiently. But all of that is the process that God uses to bring the knife to a point where he can use it as a knife. And some of the knives are beautiful. I'm thinking, man, maybe that'll be my next hobby. I got all kinds of time. Yeah, I laugh too. But I thought about what a great illustration. And sometimes when we're talking about being unworthy, it's not a big thing in our life. It's not some glaring, obvious sin. Sometimes it may be just an attitude, a lack of compliance to the will of God. And we say, well, it's not that bad. God use you in that form as if he would like to. Probably my favorite quote from the meeting was, if I can get it right. I'm not going to get it right. I'm going to mess this up. But regardless of what process that I have had to go through for God to make me more like Christ, because that's the standard. When I stand before God one day, well, this is what it was. This is where it was. This is it. Too many of us are content to be that block of metal. And we're not willing to let God remove the things that keep us from being a good knife. And then one day we're going to stand in heaven, and we're going to stand next to an Apostle Paul. We're going to stand next to the Apostle John. We're going to stand next to that we read about, Adoniram Judson. And they're going to tell us their story, and then they're going to look at us and say, now what did you do for Christ? And you're going to say, I went to church. How many souls did you lead to Christ? I went to church. Went on Wednesday nights. Thought occurred to me. I remember as a young preacher hearing all these stories of different preachers and things that they had done in their life, and I started praying, God, would you give me a story? Would you give me a life where I could tell people that you did great things in my life? You know what I found? In order to have those stories, I had to let him do a lot of cutting. There's a lot of things he's had to remove from my life. And maybe that thing that makes you unworthy to partake of the Lord's Supper is simply you're not letting God do what he wants to do with your life. Maybe not even a sin to some people. But God can't use you the way he wants to use you because you're not letting him remove the things that you want in your life. I don't know about you. I don't want to stand beside the Apostle Paul and say, well, I wish I'd done more now. Don't you want to see God do great things in your life? Answer your prayers. Man, we partake of the Lord's Supper sometimes so easily. We don't think about, maybe my sin is not things that I've done, but the things that I'm not willing to do. But I let God take my favorite whatever, person, place, or thing from my life. Would I give him that? Would I let God be God in my life for that? That was, to me, a profound thought. And I hope you'll consider it today. I'm going to read a few things and we're going to have some time of examination.